what stories do you like to tell about yourself? What are those moments that have been the most meaningful, transformational, perhaps most entertaining that you love to share or that people often ask you to share? Welcome to Time to Come Alive. My name is Valerie, and I am your host. Each week, we have a beautiful opportunity to get even more conscious, more connected, and become even more creative as a result. Because I have amazing guests that help us bring that energy to life. Now, for those of you who are not already subscribed, please make sure that you go to the YouTube channel and subscribe there. That way you'll get a notification anytime a new video is posted. Or if you prefer to get this directly into your email inbox, go to www.timetocomealive.com, and that way you'll get an email each time a new episode is released. Today's guest, as you already can see, I started off with stories as one of our areas to reflect on. Today's guest, her name is Elizabeth Johnston. I met Elizabeth, I want to say it was serendipitously, Elizabeth, because you reached out to me via email after both of us had attended a conference. And you know, those conferences where you don't really get a chance to meet everybody, but at the end you get this whole guidebook of everyone who attended. Well, Elizabeth, you were so bold and so assertive in reaching out to the people in the guidebook that you felt that resonated with what you were up to and what you needed, that you reached out to me. And when I saw that you were a story coach and you're trying to create and get some information about your marketing so that it would build your story business, I was like, sure, why not? I love talking about stories. So thank you so much for saying yes to being a part of Time to Come Alive. Welcome to the show.
Well, thank you. I'm so happy that we have this opportunity to chat, and I'm really grateful to you that you responded to my request for market research all those months ago, because like you said, I did go through that directory and I thought, like, you know, who would be a good person to speak to, you know, and so and then of course then how to ask, because you don't want to come across as, you know, spamming people or bothering them. And so I took a long time in crafting that request email, and I was surprised at how many people replied and said, sure, I'll help you. It's like, wow, that was easy.
It worked. But I think what really drew me in was this idea of personal stories. I think you wanted to focus on people in health and wellness or something, which at first I was kind of like, I don't know if that's really my thing, but okay, I'm into it. I'm into wellness. So I thought there might be something there to share. But that wasn't even that was just the beginning, right? When we actually had our conversation, I think it was only like a 20-minute chat. But in that 20 minutes, I was like, we need to talk some more. So then we scheduled some additional time, and after that conversation is when I thought, okay, you'd be a perfect guest for the podcast. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Okay, so here's where I want to start, because storytelling, I think, is first of all, is an art form, and is probably one of the oldest art forms that's existed, I'm going to dare say. But what is it about storytelling that made you so excited or so committed to working in it?
Well, you know, I've wondered that for a long time. And I think, you know, as I get older, I get closer to the answer. You know, but when I look back on my childhood, I loved reading. I was a huge bookworm. I would read all sorts of things, but like fairy tales when I was really younger, and supernatural stuff, and just like all different kinds of, you know, historical stories, everything I read. And I love going to the films, and I love Walt Disney every Sunday, you know, sitting in front of the television, watching that. But I love to go to films, and you know, when my parents would have friends over for dinner or whatever, I would bend their ear about the latest story, and I would be in, you know, probably excruciating detail describing everything in the story that I just got.
Stories. Oh,
I was telling the story. And I would say, and I said, but we didn't know this was going to happen. But then later on, it was like, oh, that's why that happened. You know, so I was already deconstructing stories as I was enjoying them, and as a kid, and I wrote stories and I wrote poems, and but I never actually thought of myself as a writer or as a storyteller. I just love them. I think that I think there's endorphins that get released, when you're immersed in a story, and the catharsis, and it involves your whole body, your heart and your soul and your body and your mind, and if it's a good story. And and but it was in university. I was taking a humanities class, and I had my first humanities class was by this like amazing scholar, Canadian scholar, and I didn't know who he was when I was taking my class. It was only later that I realized, like, wow, that was an amazing class from an amazing guy. Anyway, but I loved humanities, and I thought, oh, this is what I want to major in. So next year I took another humanities class by another stellar person, and this was Don Coles, and he was a poet, and won the Governor General's Award in Canada for poetry. So he taught poetry, but he also taught humanities. And I wrote an essay for him. And the first class I got all A's, right? That's why I knew this is what I wanted to major in, and I'm so excellent in it. And so then I write my first paper for Don Coles, and he said, this is a great story, but it's a lousy essay.
Oh.
Please come see me. And I was like, oh my God, this was like horrible. Is it not enough that like I wrote, a bad essay? Now I have to go to the teacher's room, and like, this is so embarrassing. But he said, no, this is a really good story. Have you ever thought of going into creative writing, the program? I didn't even know there was a program, creative writing.
Wow.
So he helped me put together from my journals and all those stories and poems that I'd written over the years, and your adolescent angst years. And he helped me put it together, and I submitted my portfolio, and I got in. And so that was like the beginning of my thinking of myself as a writer, or like going in that direction. But I think like stories are so important because they're how we understand the world, and they're how we understand ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
And even I think one of the reasons that Amazon is so popular is because people go there, they have a problem.
Yeah.
Or even YouTube, they go there to have a problem. It's like, how do I get over my ex? And there'll be books written about it. How you fix your problem. Or let's say you were given up for adoption, and you're just coming to terms with that. You're probably going to be interested in memoirs about people who went through the same thing. It's like, how did they cope with it? How did they, integrate themselves again? And so, stories are the way that we understand ourselves in the world. And so I think that they're hugely important.
It's so interesting that you say that. And I mean, I couldn't agree more. But ironically, last week, I think it was last week, a compatriot of yours, actually, a friend of mine, Sana, I'm going to shout out to Sana right now. He's actually Montreal as well.
Oh, wow.
And he and I, we scheduled some time because he was like, hey, I want to understand more about how you do what you do. And, what happened is he would ask one or two questions. Poor man, he had the patience of Job for this, but he'd ask a question or two. And for every question, I told a story. Like it was not well, yes. And then I did this, that. I said, well, initially, blah, 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 blah. And then I'd launch, and it was actually quite fascinating to play back for myself how all of these things, and as I explained the process, because it wasn't like one single instance. I started to see the connection to your point, and how all the patterns in my behavior, or the pattern in my process, and so much so that, when we started talking about my entrepreneurial journey, I shared a little bit about how I became a leadership coach and speaker, blah, blah, blah. But what I didn't talk about, because it didn't really come up in conversation, really was about money and my journey with that. And also when I reached out to him and said, hey, I have a few resources that I really use to, for abundance and whatnot. But when I started to write that, I flashed back to instances when I was younger that I was like, oh, this is where the whole abundance mentality comes. It was actually since like high school I started to notice this pattern. So it's so fascinating to see how one instance in time I could like pull back the curtain
Yeah.
and see so many other stories that are linked to it. Why do we think that way? What would you attribute that to?
Um, I think because we're creative beings, like my website is Own Your Creativity. That's my business, and I really believe that um, that the only reason that you and I are sitting here is because we're creative. And
Mm.
everybody, like you couldn't get this far unless you were creative. And so, and a lot of people will say, oh, I don't have a creative bone in my body, or oh, I couldn't write my own story, I'm not a writer, I can't do this. But you know actually making room in your life for creative things can help you make better decisions. It can help you be a better leader.
Mm.
And there's scientific studies that have been shown that when you incorporate creative activities, like dance or music or writing, into your regular routine, not just one off, like once a year or something, or once every 5 years or something, like regularly,
What would be regular? Like every week, every day,
every week,
every
like
week?
for
Hmm.
sure every week,
Sure.
like at least once a week. And so there was this long-term study done for retirees. And so one group of people, they retired and basically they just did nothing. And like, for me, I can't imagine how anybody could just like, sit, on their front porch and do nothing for hours and hours. I actually admire people that can do that. I haven't mastered that skill yet, but so there's one group of people that basically just did nothing. And then there's another group that regularly engaged in activities, not just by themselves, but with other people too. And at the end of the year, the people who were actively, regularly engaged in creative endeavors had fewer falls, they were on fewer medication, they had fewer bouts of depression, and they had an overall greater sense of well-being.
Mm.
So that's like a peer-reviewed scientific study. But when I was teaching memoir writing to seniors, I called it life writing for seniors, because nobody was really interested in writing a memoir. They just wanted to get together and share their stories. And I had like a core group of like 4 to 6 people that took my courses for 5 years in a row. And we went every week around the year, except I took August off and some weeks in December. And they just kept coming back. And every week I would give them a topic to write about, and they would go away and they would write a like 750, 800 word essay on that topic, and then they would all read it aloud, and we would get some feedback, not constructive criticism, just like, wow, I can relate to that, or you were so courageous, or that reminds me of, or something like that. And so many of those people, like I said, they were just addicted to it and they kept coming back for 5 years in a row. Um, but also some people started taking that class with me initially because they were afraid of retirement.
Mm.
And they thought, like, now that I used to be a kindergarten teacher and I love those kids, and now I'm retired, how am I going to fill my days? How will I keep it purpose and meaning? And so, well, let me take this writing class and just distract myself. That was the initial impetus for taking the writing class. But then they realized in writing about their life how strong and resilient that they actually are. Because like I said, you made it this far. Somehow you've got something figured out, right? But then they became aware of it,
Yeah.
and they started feeling so much more confidence. And that's like, yeah, this third, life that I'm embarking on, I can do this. I've got this. And it wasn't my intention to like give people, that confidence or empower them. But that's what happened.
Wow. I One of the things that I love about what you said is this notion of having a group of people gather, actually write something about whatever subject, but then share it with each other. I think
Yeah.
First of all, there's one of my colleagues at UC Berkeley always says the human story is never boring. So it's
Yeah.
true. I can imagine people just sitting. I don't know if you were in a round table or
Yep.
around a
Yep.
campfire, but I could just
Oh
see
yeah.
people exchanging those stories. And then the second thing that really stands out to me is not getting the criticism. It wasn't about critiquing, but about
Yeah.
encouraging, about sharing what was inspirational about it, about what stood out to them, because we do learn so much, not only about other people, but I think we also learn about what resonates for us or how
Yep.
we relate to other people because of
Yep.
those stories. That's really powerful. And I can
It
almost
really
see in my
is.
head, I don't know, do you still do these life writing classes?
Yeah, I actually did 2 sessions just before July. I had two back-to-back sessions. They're in 6 weeks. 6 weeks.
Gotcha, gotcha. Do
Yeah.
you do them online?
Yeah, I've been doing them online now. I did do some of them online before COVID.
Yeah.
But yeah, the last two were online.
Okay, we'll talk more about that, but I'm sure that if you have some other ones coming up, that people would be interested. Because I was just like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. There's such validation, I think, right?
It
Also
is.
being able to share stories
Yeah.
that resonate for other people. What
Yeah.
did you get out of it? So you got this group together. They're all sitting around telling their stories. They get a sense of well-being. What was it like for you?
Well, I've been teaching writing, anything from poetry to business communication for over 20 years. So, and like I said, stories is just part of who I am, the air I breathe, the oxygen, whatever. And so any opportunity that I have to facilitate, a story circle like that, I take it. But yeah, I guess for me, I find it so rewarding when people realize that they have that creative capacity in them,
Mm,
because a lot of people, and this is, with my colleagues at the university, um, they work so hard and they're always giving, 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 and then there's no time left over for them to cultivate their own creativity or their minds, and they burn out. And I think, for me, I was almost on the verge of burnout, and I was getting cranky, and it's like, everything was like bugging me. And I can't stand those like administrative, lengthy meetings that go on for forever, and like nothing gets accomplished or, done. And I just find it a complete waste of time. And I had no patience for those things. Usually I'm just like, whatever, I'll just like, think of a story and amuse myself while everybody is talking. But like I just didn't have any patience for it. And I thought, oh, something is up. And then I realized for me, it was that I wasn't making time in my own life for my creativity. And I realized, like, if this kept on, I would get burnt out, or I couldn't go back. Cause like, I actually started dreading going into school, and people would say like, oh, you teach screenwriting, how lovely. And, it's like, yeah, it's lovely, but there's all that, administrative stuff. And then there's like office politics, and, it's just like any other 9 to 5 job.
mm,
And so then I thought, okay, so I have to take care of my well-being. And then when I realized that, and I found that all of those meetings again were just inconsequential. It's like it didn't bug me. I didn't focus on it, and because I was making time in my life for what was important to me.
it's like filling your tank. It sounds like that.
Right.
They say that so often. We give, we give, we give, and that just depletes us. But if there's no one else or nothing else is filling us, then we
Yeah.
end up with not having anything to give, or very, very little to give.
Exactly.
So what
Yeah.
did you do? What was that creative outlet that you found, if you're allowed to say?
Yeah, well, I mean, that at that point, it was, I thought I want to do something with other people. And like, working at the university, one of the perks is that you can get professional development grants, but you don't actually get any money for yourself. You get money to like hire collaborators, or, for other things, but it's not like, you get paid for doing whatever. But anyway, so I thought, okay, so let's see if I can get a professional development grant to put together a video and it was video poems. I don't know if you ever heard of video poems. But I hadn't heard of them until around this time, where I got this idea. And so it's like almost like it's short videos, like music videos, you know, for a band, but it's poetry and for poets. And so I had written a poem, and I thought, oh, this would be an interesting video poem, and to make it into a little video. And so I got a grant to hire somebody to create the original music. And then there was musicians that went into the studio and created the music for the little video. And also I had a woman who she was a student in stop motion animation. And so so the video is a combination of live action and stop motion animation. And so she was like this genius woman who put it all together. And so I was like the director, and I had the script, and I decided what we were going to do. And then, you know, I was able with this professional development grant to, you know, to get a team together and bring this into being. And it was so wonderful. And as you can imagine, me just talking about it, it took up a lot of my bandwidth, right? Yeah. So like there was no time to worry about those silly, you know, administrative meetings, right? It's like, yeah, okay, you have to go. And it's like, yeah, right, checklist. Okay, bye, see you, you know, next month, whatever. And then I would go and fill my cup with this amazing project and collaborating with, you know, these amazing artists as well.
Let me ask you this, Elizabeth, when did you notice it was filling your cup? What was that moment? If you think back to, you know, feeling really depleted, you're short-tempered or impatient, and then all of a sudden you had this access now to something that was exciting or that you were passionate about. What did you notice begin to shift first?
Well, I knew that would shift. I already knew that would shift when I brought my attention to it, because years ago, I had already figured that out. And this is like something that you have to learn over and over again, obviously, or at least I have to. So one of the things that I had to do before I got my permanent job teaching was do temp jobs, you know, secretarial, clerical kind of temp jobs. And I was really good at them for about the first week or two. And after that, I was bored out of my skull. And so thank goodness they were temp jobs, right? Because I couldn't do it any longer than that. But there was this temp job that I got that was going to be 6 weeks or 8 weeks, and it would take me right up till my first full-time teaching job. So it would fill the gaps. It was great, you know, thank you, universe. But I was thinking to myself, how am I going to deal with 6 or 8 weeks of it? Because like I know my limit is 2 weeks. So, and one of the things that I realized was the reason I hated those kinds of jobs is because they're really draining. And then by the time that I came home at night, I had no energy to work on my writing. And I knew that I would be really upset with myself if I didn't get some writing in, because it's like 6 to 8 weeks where, you know, it's not you know, an arduous job. It's not going to take up a lot of my time. It's just 9 to 5. Well, it's at 8 to 4. But I knew that, like, for me, I'm just completely done at the end of the day. So I thought, okay, take a leaf out of Virginia Woolf's, you know, a room of one's own, right? Because she would get up early in the morning before anybody woke up, and she would write for an hour or two. And then, you know, life happened. And so I thought, okay, that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to get up like an hour or an hour and a half early. And I'm going to do some of my own writing. So I ended up having to get up like at 4:30 in the morning. And so I wrote for about an hour and a half, and then I would, you know, get, you know, ready for work. And I'd have to go on the bus. It was about an hour and a half on the bus to get where I had to do this temp job. And I sailed through that temp job. I didn't have one day where I was complaining or like, you know, out of sorts. And I thought, why is that? Because it's not like I liked the job. It was data entry, you know, just numbers, entering numbers. Like, it's not like I liked the job, but and then I realized is I put what was important to me first.
Mm-hmm.
I put myself first. And it didn't matter that I would go to bed at 7 p.m. or 8 p.m. It's like, if that was the result, that I felt happy about what I accomplished every day, then like, yeah, I'll go to bed at 7. No problem.
I've not mastered that yet. I don't know. I'm definitely more into the late hours. But I think this is fascinating. So you started to realize that by actually doing what you loved up front, that
Yeah.
would give you the juice, the energy, so that you could do the things that you were not so thrilled about. We have it
Yeah.
so backwards, don't we? We have it so,
Yeah.
and you're right. We have to learn the lesson over and over again. There's so
Yeah.
many things I think that our society asks us to do that are so draining. Either they're the things like you said, I'm kind of like you. The administrative stuff is like, yikes, I don't really enjoy that so much.
Yeah.
But if I do the things that I love to do, if I'm teaching, if I'm
Yeah.
coaching, if I'm having conversations like this on a regular
Yeah.
basis, that does give me the kind of energy that then those things are like, yeah, like this is the part of the podcast that I like the best. I'm not a
Yeah.
fan of like, oh my gosh, now I have to write the little the description, and I
Blurb
have to
and
go link it up to this and then send it up to
yeah.
that and download it from here. Like those things are just like, ugh. But
Yeah.
I know that this is an opportunity to have that, to fill my own tank. This
Yeah,
is
exactly.
fascinating.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
okay, let's change tacks a little bit here. When you thinking about stories, what are your favorite stories to tell about yourself?
I think, well, one of my favorite stories is that I left home when I was 16 and I didn't finish high school.
Mm-hmm.
In Ontario, where I grew up, at the time high school was to grade 13 and or grade 12. So you could get a diploma, either one. But I don't know, when you're in grade 7 or 8, they make you take a test and then decide that, okay, you're going to go to the grade 12 stream or you're going to go into grade 13 stream. And if you go into the grade 13 stream, that means that you're going to go into university or you're destined to, go there. But I left home when I was 16, just after I finished grade 11. So I didn't even have my high school diploma. And I was in the militia, the weekend warriors at that time. And we were just going away in the summer. After I finished grade 11, we were going away to do our basic training. And then the plan was to come back in September and go to grade 12 and, continue.
Yeah.
But things took a turn. And so I left home. And luckily I was in the militia and I could get a Class B call out, which was a full-time position without being in the full-time military. So I was still in the militia, but I got a full-time call out. And then I met this, I worked for this woman. She was a captain at the time, and she became like my good mom. And so she took me under her wing. It's like, oh my God, I can't believe she's 16 years old. And like, what mother can like let her go? And, anyway, so I worked for her for a few years. And then meanwhile, I did actually go back and, get my grade 12 and then eventually I went to university. And then, I love telling that story to my students I teach one of the classes I teach is self-management techniques. And it's for students who have failed out of the program at the university, and they have to take my class to get back on track with their motivation and goals and, and a lot of times they really feel like they're really dumb or school is really dumb and people made them do this and, they don't want to be here and, whatever. So there's all this like, victimhood and everything. And I said, you don't know where your life is going to end up. And yes, there's going to be ups and downs and things that you didn't plan for. But that doesn't mean that you can't still reach your goals and that you can't achieve something great. It's like, who would have thought that, at 16 years old, you only have grade 11 and you're living on your own. Like, how are you going to figure it out, But somehow I did. And here I am now standing in front of, university students. So I love to tell that story because I feel like it's a hopeful one. And it just shows you, that what you can do.
How do they respond?
Well, usually they're really surprised because first I asked them, I said, so how do you think that I got this job? what do you think the process might have been for me to get this job? And they all say, oh yeah, you went to high school and then you went to university and then you did, a master's, and then you did PhD, and then, here you are teaching. I said, no, I quit school after grade 11. What?
That'll get them. It does it help with what do they, how do they, what's the impact on them once they've
Yeah,
gotten?
I think for some of them it does. And I don't tell that story every single time I teach that class, and I've taught it a zillion times, but you kind of judge, and get the temperature of, like, the people in there. But I've changed it. Sometimes I reveal it like in class 2, or sometimes I wait to halfway through or to the end. And I find that when I have it closer to the beginning, it helps them. Not everybody, because like some people are just entrenched in their victimhood, and it doesn't matter, what skills or how helpful their peers are or whatever, right? They're just where they are. And but some people are on the fence, and when they hear a story like that, it inspires them, and they think, okay, I'm going to make the most of this, I'm going to get everything I can, and then they light up, and then they can access their creativity and their passion. And I guess that's the other reason why I love creativity and writing, is because that connects you to your passion, which is where your purpose is.
Mm, that's really beautiful. I can't agree. I couldn't agree more. I shouldn't say that. I agree. I agree a lot. Have you watched Michelle Obama's, or have you read Michelle Obama's book Becoming by any chance?
Not yet.
Not yet. Have you watched her Netflix special
Nope.
about?
I don't have Netflix.
You
I
don't
don't
have
have
Netflix.
Netflix.
Okay. Well, for those of you who have or have watched Netflix, specifically the Netflix special. So she has a book tour, clearly, and after she writes her book and goes to all these different cities, and apparently in the Netflix special is basically a compilation of all these different places and meetings that she has because of this book tour. And in one of the cities, she meets with a group of young ladies, all I think high school students, and they're all sitting in the circle, and it's Michelle Obama and a few other people, a few adults, and then some other students. And at one point, one of the young ladies in the group says, I'm not really sure why I'm here, why she was selected to be a part of this circle. And,
Ah,
and she said, because I haven't really done anything special. Like, I don't really, I'm not that, I'm not like in a, honor society and blah, 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 gifted and talented or whatever she said. And Michelle says, well, what do you do? Like, what are you about? And she starts to say, well, I take care of my younger siblings because I think it was, I don't know if her parents both worked or her mother was no longer in the picture. I couldn't remember exactly all the details, but she starts to say all the hardship really that she's found at this young age, and now having to take the responsibility for helping raise her kid or her siblings, and Michelle looks at
wow.
her and says, "That's why you're here.
Oh my goodness.
Your story is why you're
Yeah.
here." And I actually teared up when I heard that,
Yeah.
because I also work and mentor some young people, and I can see that if we don't affirm and validate that hardships create as much success as success, right? Especially in
Yeah.
terms of what we see in social media, what we see in the news, what we see in mainstream media. That's a missed opportunity.
Yeah.
Most beautiful stories come out of some sort of hardship, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was such a wonderful moment. It really inspired me to, okay, so what do I share with people that could also let them know? And I've also heard that I'm very strong and resilient in many ways, but people don't always know the backstory, like how did I become this,
Yeah.
strong and resilient. So being able to
Yeah.
share that, yeah, so that really resonates with what you share with your students.
So
What
how did you become strong and resilient then?
Oh, there's so many moments, but I think two things come to mind. One is both my parents are just like super wonderful role models for that. Both of them immigrated to the U.S. First of all, all of us immigrated to the U.S. from Panama. So I think part of it is the immigrant story. But even before that, I think knowing that my parents were going against the grain of their own families,
Mm.
meaning my dad joined the military when he was 34. That was like the cutoff at the time for the military.
Oh,
And he could have done what all of his other peers had done and just kind of stuck it out in Panama
yeah.
doing what he did. But I think his need and want to go above and beyond where he was, I think that's one. He got his black belt in taekwondo at age 54 or something like that because he was
Wow.
stationed in Korea. He had the time. You know, my
Wow.
mom moving to the U.S. Because now as a military wife, that's what you do. And she had a teaching career. So there's so many things I think that just leading up to that, my parents modeled so well. For me, beyond the example that I had from my parents, I think I'm the only girl. I have three brothers.
Oh, wow.
So in and of itself, you got to be kind of tough. You know,
Yeah. Oh,
you talk
yeah.
about victimhood.
Yeah.
My parents did not tolerate tears, so part of it, I'd always found it a little bit challenging to cry for very long because it never got my way. I didn't
Didn't
get
work.
anything out of it. So I had to kind of be tough and use more of my logic and my intelligence to communicate my needs. That's
Yeah.
people, or at least my family, were much more responsive. But then a very small example, I guess a story, if you will. I remember and I'm sure there's younger, but I don't have that developed right now, so I couldn't even tell you. But when I was in my 20s, I was 23, just graduated from college, and I joined a company called Up with People, a nonprofit organization, and we traveled internationally. We performed a
Wow.
musical. We did community service and lived with host families. And my role was to be an event coordinator for the group, which meant I would go a month in advance and help set up performance, venue, promote the program, find host families, coordinate community service, all that good stuff. And I typically would have an intern or several interns with me so I could teach them and develop them along the way. Well, I had one experience shadowing somebody doing that job, or collaborating with somebody doing that job before I was sent to Venezuela, where we
Wow.
hadn't been forever. And it so
Oh my
happened
goodness.
that the city that we were supposed to tour in, the sponsor kind of went MIA. We had no idea how to contact them. These were, days prior to email and cell phones. So no
Wow.
one responded to the phone calls. No one responded to the faxes. And they were like, okay, Valerie, you and your intern get a one-way ticket. Go figure it out. And
Whoa.
it was nerve-wracking because I don't want to lose my job. And I'm responsible for developing this guy. And I'm like,
Wow.
we booked a hotel. We didn't have money for a hotel for very long, so we had to find our own host family. It was like Survivor in a way.
Wow.
Go figure out in this remote city in East Venezuela. And what was
My
so
goodness.
beautiful about it, I think what helped me with the resilience, knowing that my family had also supported so many things, so many traits in me that made me
Yeah.
okay, it's okay to be assertive and confident and independent. So I just started
Mhm.
talking to people, and the more people we talked to, the more stuff we got. So
Wow.
eventually they were like, don't worry about host families. We'll pay for your hotel. Like the government
Oh
paid
my
for our
goodness.
hotel. They got us a baseball stadium to perform in. We couldn't even have host families because there were we had very few because we had very little time, and they were like, oh, we'll get the military barracks to host some of your people, and things
Wow.
boom. So I think part of it is for me understanding myself and my strength because of the family I come from, and also
Yeah.
they fed so much of that into me that it was like I don't have time to sit here and cry about it. Like, okay, how do I get
Yeah.
creative? How do I support this guy that's here to learn and also make
Yeah.
sure that I don't lose my job in the process? Anywho, so that's a recent one that I
That's
remember now being
awesome.
like,
What a
oh
great
yeah,
story.
that's cool. So I'm gonna put that in a book sometime
Yeah.
or in a speech.
Definitely. Yeah.
So I'm curious about the stories you like to hear. So clearly you asked me that question because you wanted to hear the story, but what kind of stories do you like to listen to?
Yeah, well, I enjoy the stories like that, and that's why, I ask them, but also like I work one-on-one with people who think that they want to write their memoir, or, something about their life. Maybe they want to just do a personal memoir or a business memoir. And they come to me, and So I asked them questions like, okay, you know, first, like, what kind of story do you think that you want to write? And then I asked them why. And then I asked them, like, connect it to something in their past. And, you know, because if you want to write a memoir or a book about your business that combines your personal story, it can't just be like the punchline, right? It can't just be, you know, and I went to Venezuela and I did this amazing job. Oh, good for you.
Oh, really? I can't say that.
Yeah, you know, but people learn from, like, the story that you share, but also people, when they're writing their story, they learn about themselves in that process. Like, you came to an awareness of, like, wow, this could be a good story. I can, you know, do a talk and I can inspire other people. But it's only when, and after you unearth the story and you realize the import of it, that you can share it with other people. And but you also realize, you know, significant things about yourself. And I love when the light bulb goes on in people's eyes about, like, wow, I'm pretty amazing. You know, because people don't realize how amazing they are and how much they've achieved and how much they figured out.
This,
And then,
go ahead.
and even if they do, they think, oh, well, that's bragging, or, you know, I'm not gonna, like, be full of myself. But that's your light shining, right? And we all want to come out of the darkness. And if we all hit our light, we would all be sitting in the dark, right? But so, yeah, I love stories like that. But I also love other stories like poetry, and I like fiction, and I like really creative stuff, because that's what is also going to fuel your creativity. Because if you just, like, if you like memoir and you only read memoir, then it's kind of like you're starving yourself from all the other vitamins out there, right? You're just overdosing on one vitamin, right? And so if
Interesting
you,
metaphor.
I just made that up.
I love it. Overdosing on a memoir vitamin.
Yeah, you know, and so I like to watch Billy Collins on Facebook. He does these lives. He was the poet laureate of the US for a while. And I love his poems because they're so accessible. And a lot of times people think, like, oh, poetry, you have to have a PhD to, like, you know, understand it. And he's got this great poem where he's trying to teach poetry to, I don't know if it's university or high school students, but he's in the poem, he's saying, you know, I want you just to be on water skis, waving at the poem on the shore. He said, I don't want you to be, you know, tying it to a chair and beating the truth out of it.
Wow.
And a lot of times that's what we think, like, oh, we can't understand, you know, poetry. You know, we have to, you know, beat the truth out of it, or, you know, have somebody translate it for us, even though it's in the language that we're speaking, right? And so, and then I actually saw something, Intelligence Squared. I don't know if you've ever I just came across that on YouTube, Intelligence Squared, and it's something in the UK, but they film it, and it's in a big hall, and there's a host, and then there's two people who are the content curators, and then there's four actors that will read the poem or the speech. There was one episode about great speeches, political speeches, and then the other one I saw was about the power of poetry. And so then these Jeanette Winterston was there, and what was it, William Siegfried or something. He's not a writer, but he's a curator of and he created poetry, and he created National Poetry Day in the UK. And so then, and now he's known as, he's got a book called the Poetry Pharmacy. And so it started a few years ago where they would go to these literary festivals, and a friend of his said, I'm going to put you in this tent, and we're going to say, like, the poetry doctor is in, and people can come in and whatever issue that they have, you know, because he's an encyclopedia for poems, and you just read a poem to them that's going to help them with their issue. And so now he's got a book out, you know, about that. Um, and so that was so delightful to watch that and hear the poems that Jeanette Winterston, a novelist, and William Siegfried, you know, pulled out of their hat. And it was so inspiring, you know, and like that recharges your batteries too, right? It isn't just your own creativity, because like, you know, you have to have input from the outside as well. And so I don't have to always go and, you know, create a collaboration with other artists to nurture my creativity. It can be just watching this amazing video about people sharing their poems.
That's really fascinating. All right, well, I have one for you to add to your list. What kind of
Yeah,
music do you like?
I love blues. I love blues. And I like classical too. I also love Nick Cave. I don't know if you've ever heard of Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, but you should Google him. And he's an amazing writer and lyricist. But he's got this blog now. It's called the Red Hand Files. And a few years ago, his son, who was 15 years old, died. He fell off a cliff and died. And so Nick Cave stopped touring for a while. As you can imagine, it was really hard. But then he was emerging out of that, and he started this blog. And so people just, his fans, will write a question, and he'll just, you know, answer them. And there's silly questions, profound questions, and everything in between. And you read them and your breath is taken away. I just, you know, it so steeped in humanness and wisdom and just everything that makes up a human being is in there, and empathy and caring and humor. So anyway,
So
yeah,
Nick
Nick
Cave, you
Cave.
said? Yeah. Is he cute?
Yeah, he's cute.
Okay, perfect. I'm like, all right, Elizabeth, there's a lot there. So here's my recommendation for you. You ready?
Great.
I just finished reading, which I would have never thought I would. I've read this book, Decoded, by the rapper JayZ.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yes.
Oh,
And I remember Oprah Winfrey mentioning it years ago, and I was just like, wow, Oprah, okay, cool.
yeah.
But then my older brother, who also is an avid reader, and he talked about it, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I like some hip hop, but I wouldn't necessarily call myself a fan. Like, I've listened to some of Jay-Z's most popular songs, whatever's playing mainstream radio, but don't have any of his albums or any of that. But what he does in the book is decode basically the lyrics to some of his music, the collaborations that took place in order for it to happen, the kind of life. Like, if you want story and some of the gritty story of growing up in you know, in Bed-Stuy, New York, which is in many cases, you know, the projects, in poverty with people. I mean, all sorts of characters in there. It was fascinating read, and I think for someone that is as enthusiastic and passionate about writing styles and different forms of creativity, there's a science. I'm gonna.
Yeah.
I mean, it's definitely an art, but I would even call it, in the way he decoded it, a
Yeah.
science to
Yeah.
how rap is written, and the rhymes that are made, and the life and the vocabulary that is, you know, that's woven throughout. So anyway, so that's my
Cool.
recommendation for you. I know.
Great. Thank you.
So you can add to Nick Cave, JayZ to
Yeah.
your list.
Yeah.
I want to go back to something you talked about earlier when you mentioned the story circles, I believe you call them, the life
Uh-huh.
writing. Life writing.
Life writing. Yeah.
Okay, so if somebody now listening to this conversation is now inspired because you brought so much passion, so much like, oh, yes, I want to unearth my stories. How does one begin the process of unearthing worthy stories?
Well, I think, you know, that one of the important words there, the important word there is worthy. You know, how do we unearth worthy stories? And I think that initially we can't worry about whether they're worthy or not. We just need to get our stories out there, and whether they're worthy to somebody else is kind of beside the point. They're your stories and they're important to you, and I think, like, oftentimes in the life writing for seniors that I did, you know, people would be embarrassed, or they would say, oh, I couldn't come up with anything for this week's theme or whatever. And then they share the story and people were amazed at what they came up with, you know, or even it's just a turn of phrase, you know. I mean, that could be worth it. It's just that one line. And in fact, like, writers, you know, who are in the business of, you know, writing, novelists, they know that it's pretty much 90% of what they write is not going to make the light of day. Mm-hmm. And it's not because it's not worthy or it's not, you know, important or whatever. It's because it doesn't help them tell the eventual story. But all those attempts are you figuring out what the story is that you want to say. And anytime you achieve anything, there's going to be ups and downs and bumps until you actually get there, right? But if you didn't do all of those things leading up to it, you wouldn't have got there. Right?
So writing works the same way, that the bumps are part of the process. They help.
Yeah,
exactly. Like you said, you have to dig some things out and throw off the dirt to the side in order to actually get to the treasure.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, you could start writing on your own, but unless you're just sort of like fueled from inside naturally, it's probably going to be hard for you to stick to it. So that's why being part of a group is really great, because you fuel each other, right? You get inspired by other people. And like, I've had people say, like, oh, I'm going to go back and rewrite my story now that I remember things by listening to everybody else's, right? So, and that's another thing. People say, oh, I don't have any stories, or I can't remember them. You do, but you have to put yourself in that place where you can remember them and where your memory can be jogged. And so it's by other writers, but also a facilitator or a coach or whatever, you know, that is guiding the process. And just start. I mean, you never know where it's going to lead.
That's so true.
But you have to start.
That's so true. And I have to give a shout out. I have an informal writing group of people that I've joined recently. We took a writing course together, and this was maybe a month or two ago now, but on a regular basis, they meet a lot more often than I do with them, but we get together on Zoom and just write. We actually don't talk that much. We talk maybe the first 5-10 minutes just to get acquainted, and then we just write. But writing together, the act of sitting and writing, I think helps at least, you know, get just the discipline of being, you know, of writing more regularly. So shout out to Patricia and Lizzie and Jennifer and all those others who have joined us. Now, you also do this kind of work with groups. So tell us about what you have coming up that would help people get into this.
Yeah, I'm really excited about the memoir writing retreat that is coming up August 21st to 23rd. And I'm co-leading that with another writer, Sherry Mers. Sherry is amazing. She's written over 30 books, and she just is like a powerhouse when it comes to, you know, getting things done. And she's really organized and planning things out. So she's going to be teaching that part. I'm going to be teaching the part of, you know, figuring out what part of your life story you want to write about, because a memoir is just a slice of life. And that's where a lot of people, when they think about writing about their life, they get overwhelmed because they think autobiography, which is a completely different animal than a memoir. A memoir is just a slice of your life, of something significant that you went through or accomplished. It's not just like, you know, going to the store to get milk. You know, it's like,
unless it was really dramatic.
Right. Yeah. You know. So honing in on that part of your life that you're going to write about, and then ending up with your one-page outline. So it's, you know, you'll have all your chapters down, and you'll know exactly what to write, and then Sherry will take over and help you figure out how you're going to make time in your life and how to schedule it so that you actually write your story. And that's coming up August 21 to 23. But what I'm really excited about, I mean, like, I just love teaching story structure and all that stuff. I can do that until the cows come home with the milk or not. And but what I'm really excited about here is that it's a retreat. It's not just learning, it's also having fun. And so we're going to be doing, and it's online. And so we're going to have activities and exercises and discussion that is going to make it really fun as well as practical.
Well, if everything that you said about storytelling, the fact that it's an opportunity to like really recognize one's value, their own worthiness, right? To identify and be and fall in love with themselves essentially.
Yeah.
It sounds
Yeah.
like what you said. You get to fall in love with yourself and everything that you've lived up to the moment that has created who you are. That is it's got to be fantastic to be in a group of people who are also aiming for the same thing, and then also with the guidance, your guidance and guidance of your collaborator to birth something. So at the end of the retreat, what is the outcome for people? Are they going to have a outline for memoir? They're going to have a plan
Yeah,
for
they're going to have their whole outline, but they'll also have parts of it written too. So, snippets of it that could be written, and then they can organize that, post retreat.
Got it. Do you work with people beyond retreats? Do you have like
Yeah,
one-on-ones or smaller groups? Okay.
yeah. I have smaller groups, and I also work one-on-one, and so I've helped people, write the through the whole process of writing their book.
Yay. Tell us your website again, Elizabeth.
Yeah, so it's ownyourcreativity.com.
Ownyourcreativity.com.
Yeah.
Cool. And I'll put that in the show notes so that way people have just to click and get more information. Wow,
Yeah.
this has been fascinating conversation. Thank you so much. What else? Is there anything else as we wrap up that you'd like to add or share that we haven't talked?
So if they're interested in the retreat, they can go to bit.ly/rapid memoir, rapid as in fast.
Okay. We'll put
Rapid
that in the
memoir.
link as well.
That'd be great.
Is
Yeah.
it on your website too, though? Is it
No,
connected?
I actually haven't put it on my website. We have our own page for that, but good point. I'm going to put it on my
Yeah,
webpage
make it
right
easy.
after this.
Okay, perfect. Well, we'll add both links just in case.
That'd be great.
Good deal. Wow, Elizabeth, thank you so much for sharing. I think if nothing else, you really put into my head, write everything down.
Yeah.
I do have, one of the things, I'm in Toastmasters, and I
Oh,
committed,
awesome.
I use it as I said I use it as a discipline to write on a regular basis because every time I'm up for a speech, I know that every speech I write has something to do with something I would do for my work. So
Right.
it's a presentation, is the introduction to a workshop. There's something that I use it for, and it's helped me so much. Like even last night, my pastor reached out and said, "Hey, would you like to do the sermon one of these days online?" I'm like, "Yeah, actually, I
Oh,
just
that's
thought of a subject
awesome.
that I'm going to write a speech about. That this would be perfect." So
Yeah.
having the discipline, I can see it be very valuable, and the joy that you brought to the process and to the unearthing of the stories. And I think I love what you said also about the creativity expand not being undernourished, right, to getting all the vitamins, your
Yeah.
vitamin F for fiction and vitamin N for non-fiction and all that, vitamin P for poetry. I mean, I could go on. I should stop.
Been
Ah,
great. I've loved this conversation.
this is
We should have more conversations like this.
Yes, there you go. You can set up a writing support group or something. I don't know what it is. We'll figure something out.
Yeah, yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for everything that you shared and for all the things that you're up to help people get not only their stories out there, but value themselves even more and teach others. It's a great way, like you said, to inspire and teach other people. Whoo! That's a roller coaster there. Everyone that's tuned in, thank you so much for listening today and watching this episode of Time to Come Alive. As I told you in the beginning, make sure that you go to timetocomealive.com and subscribe there so that you get this in your inbox. And you can also subscribe to the YouTube channel, and that way you get notified anytime a new video is up. So, Elizabeth, thank you once again. Love the work that you're doing. I'm sure that all of us are going to think of some really cool stories to tell people. And hopefully, you had some people in your retreat to start actually putting it out in the world.
Awesome.
Yay! All right, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of the day.